Okay, so Khanna just called the Venezuela operation what it is: oil theft, constitutional violation. And look, the crazy part isn't even that it happened. The crazy part is they did this, captured a head of state, flew 115 planes into another country, and they're saying Congress doesn't need to know about it? That's the precedent we're setting right now. And this is about what you lose when you decide power is permission. Again, let's watch this interview, and I will give you guys my take later.
Democratic Congressman Khanna of California sits on the Armed Services Committee. He's joining us right now. Congressman, thanks so much for spending some time with us. Let me start by asking you about that phone call with the leadership that you had just a little while ago. What did they say?
Wolf, there was deep concern that the Gang of Eight were not notified, that the president didn't come for congressional authorization. But there's a broader concern, and that is that we have a moral crisis in this country. Most Americans don't believe in gunboat diplomacy. They don't believe that we can just go in with overwhelming military force into a poorer country, into a weaker country, and take their oil. And we need to have a reckoning in this country about our values. Are we still the moral pillar, the moral beacon to the world?
When you say the Gang of Eight, you're referring to the leaders, the Democratic and Republican leaders in the House and Senate Armed Services Committees and in the Intelligence Committees as well. Secretary of State Rubio says this was what he calls a trigger-based mission. As he put it, the kind of mission you can't notify Congress about. It's too sensitive and potentially dangerous. If any of the information is leaked from Congress, it could endanger the lives of U.S. military personnel if there is that kind of leak. What do you say to that?
Well, when do you notify Congress then? We are Article 1 of the Constitution on War and Peace. You're telling me that going into another country, capturing their leader, having a coup, arresting their leader, having 115 planes fly over that nation, and now talking about running that country, having nation building, having the president threaten the current vice president, saying we'll have more military force. You're saying none of that needs a notification of Congress or a vote of Congress? That just is doesn't pass the laugh test.
So are you saying, Congressman, that the administration violated the law?
The administration clearly violated the law. They should have come to Congress. They still should come to Congress for any additional information. They did not consult any of our allies. They did not do what George Bush Sr. did in the first Persian Gulf War, building a multilateral coalition. They didn't go to the United Nations, something even George W. Bush did. And the irony is that the president, who criticized nation building, who criticized regime change wars, now is talking about running Venezuela. And the American people are asking, what about running America? What about our healthcare? What about our jobs? What about our cost of living?
Is it too late now, Congressman, for the administration to notify Congress about further military involvement in Venezuela?
No, they should. What we want to know is, what is the plan? They should come to Congress. They should be very clear that any further military intervention, they will seek congressional authorization, and they should answer how long we plan to stay there, how much this is going to cost the American taxpayers, and what the end game is.
Were you part of that emergency meeting that the House Democrats had today, the congressional leadership? And if so, what else can you tell us about those conversations?
I was. I can tell you that the Leader Jeffries and ranking members of the Armed Services Committee, Intelligence Committees, Foreign Affairs Committees were all deeply concerned that Congress did not have any say in this. And what we expect is for the administration to come before the Congress to explain what the plan is going forward and to seek authorization. But there's also just a sense that this is not how America conducts itself in the world. You know, we are different than Xi Jinping and China. We are different than Putin. We are different than past empires or colonial powers. We believe in human rights. We respect national sovereignty. We created the post-World War II order. And now you have a president who says, well, if I want something, I'm powerful. I got the most powerful military in the world. Let me go take it. That's not what we teach our kids. And that's what I want to emphasize, is this is a real moral failing in the United States of America.
What do you believe, Congressman, was the administration's real goal here? Was it drug enforcement, regime change, or controlling the vast amount of oil reserves in Venezuela, or was it all three?
I think it was all three. The top of it, though, is the president's been clear. He wants Maduro out, and he's been pushing for a regime change now for months. I believe they obviously want to stop some of the narcotics trafficking, but it's very important. Even they acknowledge it's not fentanyl coming from there; it's cocaine that is coming from there. And third, they are saying that they want the oil, but that's Venezuelan oil. And the fact that they're going to have Tim Wirth of Chevron try to run the country and to expropriate monies for oil that is for the Venezuelan people, that's a form of colonialism. Maybe that was the case with McKinley. I know President Trump admires McKinley. That was in the 19th century. We don't operate in that way in the 21st century. We respect other nations. We respect human rights. We have plenty of wealth in this country that we need to figure out how every person participates. We don't go just grabbing wealth and land from other nations.
Because the administration is arguing that the Venezuelan government stole a lot of the oil that American oil companies had really built up in Venezuela, and that the U.S. deserves payment for that.
Well, there's a legal process for that. First of all, as Congressman Massey has pointed out, there were contracts that the oil companies entered into that were voided. And those are risks that those oil companies took. But if there are legal claims, then there is a process for doing that. You don't just go invade another country to settle a legal dispute. I mean, China has enormous stealing of intellectual property for American companies. No one is saying we should just go invade China to make American companies whole. And so we have processes for these. We have a rule of law. This president, he openly says he thinks it's the rule of the jungle. Might makes right. You take whatever you can get. And that's just not, Wolf, the America I believe in. That's not what our teachers are teaching our kids. And that's not the America that is the shining light to the world.
The House Armed Services Committee, and you're a key member of that committee, plans to hold a hearing on Venezuela, a special hearing later this week. What do you want to know as this operation moves forward?
First, I want to know how quickly can we get Venezuela deciding the future of Venezuela? Second, when will our troops be out? Third, what is the risk to our troops? Because if they're going to be helping the oil companies, are we putting our troops in harm's way? Fourth, what is the cost of this operation? Fifth, who's going to be in charge of Venezuela? Is it going to be a Democratic leader, the Nobel laureate, or is it going to be a continuation of the Maduro regime? And how are we going to ensure that there is stability when the new government emerges?
President Trump says the United States will, quote, run Venezuela. His word, run Venezuela, at least for the time being. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, seemed to clarify that a bit earlier today, saying that the U.S. will run policy in Venezuela. His words, run policy. What's your biggest concern about all of this?
How are we going to do that? Well, Venezuela is a country of 30 million people. And Wolf, you know this, that's twice the size of Iraq. Iraq was about 15 million. We were never able to run Iraq. We were clear in being able to depose Saddam Hussein with our awesome military power. The problem was what came after. We deposed Gaddafi in Libya, but the problem was what came after. And it is just hubris to think that the United States is going to know how to govern a country like Venezuela or know what the policies are that are going to be able to govern Venezuela. And this is what Donald Trump ran against. He said, look, I'm not going to get into these regime change wars. I'm going to focus on Pennsylvania, on Michigan, on communities here at home. And that's why I think we need to get out of Venezuela as quickly as possible and have Venezuela in charge of its own future.
Congressman Khanna, as usual, thanks so much for joining us.
Because here's what just became true. Article 1 of the Constitution apparently has an asterisk now. War powers belong to Congress unless you really want something. Unless it's trigger-based. Unless telling the people who are supposed to authorize war might slow you down. And once you make that exception, once you say the legal process doesn't apply when it's inconvenient, what exactly are you still calling a law? This is the too sensitive to tell Congress defense. Which means what? That the branch of government specifically given war powers in the Constitution is now a security risk? That the people elected to represent Americans can't be trusted with the decision to invade another country? You've just made the case that democracy itself is too dangerous for military decisions. That's what you just argued. And here's the thing about skipping legal processes. You don't get to pick which ones matter anymore. If you can bypass Congress because you've got a plan and you've got power, then what's stopping anyone else with power and a plan? Why does China need UN approval? Why does Russia need international law? You just prove those things are optional. You prove the rule is, if you can do it, you're allowed to do it. This is also about what you become when you announce you're taking someone else's oil, not securing it, not protecting American assets, taking it, running their country to get it. You just became the thing we spent 70 years saying we weren't. The thing we built the entire post-World War II order to prevent, and you did it openly. You said the quiet part loud, and now that's just American foreign policy. Because what do you call it when you invade a country and install people to run their government so you can control their resources? There's a word for that. It's colonialism. It's exactly colonialism. And you can't teach your kids that empires were wrong, that stealing land and resources is wrong, and then do this. You can't say we're different from authoritarian regimes and then do exactly what authoritarian regimes do when they want something. This is what happens when you govern like it's the 1800s. You start comparing yourself to McKinley. You start thinking gunboat diplomacy is just efficiency. You start believing that having the most powerful military means you get to decide what belongs to you. And that worked for empires right up until the entire world decided empires were wrong. We were part of that decision. We helped make that the rule, and now we're unmaking. And think about the cost here. Not the dollar cost, though. That's real. The cost of being the country that does this. Because you don't get to be the moral authority on human rights after this. You don't get to criticize China for taking what it wants. You don't get to sanction Russia for violating sovereignty. You already did it. They'll just point at Venezuela. They'll just say you did it first, you did it bigger, and you bragged about it. Here's what also just became impossible: arguing for the rule of law. Because if laws don't constrain your own government when it wants something, then what are you even defending? Why should anyone follow international law? Why should anyone respect treaties or norms or agreements? You just proved those are things weak countries have to follow. You proved might makes right. And once that's the system, there is no system. This is also about who this serves. Because it's not everyday American. It's oil companies getting their assets back through military force. It's using troops to settle corporate disputes. And you can't do that and then ask those troops to risk their lives for American security. You can't send them to protect profit and call it patriotism. That's not what service means. That's not what sacrifice means. And there's no exit strategy here. That's the part that keeps repeating. Iraq was supposed to be quick, Libya was supposed to be clean, and Venezuela is twice the size of Iraq. 30 million people, and we're going to run their government? We're going to decide their policies based on what expertise, based on what track record? We couldn't stabilize Iraq. We couldn't prevent Libya from collapsing. But somehow this time it'll work? What you just watched is the moment where someone has to decide if America means something or if it's just the country with the biggest military. If our values apply to us or if they're just talking points. If the Constitution binds the president or if it's a suggestion he can ignore when he's got a goal, and the answer to that shapes everything that comes next. So yeah, that's the precedent. That's what we just decided power allows. And if you think that stops at Venezuela, you haven't been paying attention to how precedents work. Hit the like and subscribe button. We need to keep spreading this. I will catch you guys in the next one.